In 1871, a German merchant walked into Turkey. No funding, no university backing, just a copy of Homer's Iliad, and a theory everyone called insane. 6 weeks later, he found Troy. That was only number 5. The other 4, they make Troy look easy to find. One is still sitting at the bottom of the ocean. One vanished into rose-red desert cliffs. And one civilization disappeared so completely, we still cannot read a single word they wrote. Let's start. For most of human history, Troy was a poem. A beautiful, epic, impossible poem, full of wooden horses and 10-year wars and gods who picked sides. Scholars read it. They enjoyed it, but they did not believe it. Homer was a storyteller. Troy was fiction. Heinrich Schliemann did not care what scholars thought. He was a German merchant who'd made a fortune in the California gold rush. Not mining, selling supplies to miners. Smart man, obsessive man. And he was obsessed with one idea: Troy was real. Here's what nobody tells you about how he found it. Schliemann didn't stumble onto Troy. He argued his way to it. A British archaeologist named Frank Calvert had already identified a hill called Hazarlik in northwestern Turkey as a possible site. Calvert didn't have the money to dig. Schliemann did. So in 1871, Schliemann showed up, got permission from the Ottoman government, and started digging. He dug fast, maybe too fast. In 1873, at the very bottom of the mound, he hit a layer of burned buildings. Gold jewelry, bronze weapons, a hoard of thousands of items, which he smuggled out of Turkey wrapped in his wife Sophia's shawl. He called it Priam's treasure, the treasure of the Trojan king. Except, and here's the part that still gets me, he was wrong. The treasure he found was 1,000 years older than Homer's Troy. He had dug right past the actual Trojan War layer in his rush to reach the bottom. Troy had 9 layers of cities, one built on the ruins of another, stretching from 3000 BC all the way to Roman times. The Troy of the Iliad, if it existed, was layer 7. Schliemann found layer 2. He never admitted the mistake. And yet he was right about the big thing. Troy was real, a prosperous Bronze Age city, sitting at the mouth of the Dardanelles Strait, controlling trade between the Aegean and the Black Sea. The kind of city worth fighting over. The kind of city worth a 10-year war. Number 4. A city so hidden inside a canyon that it was only rediscovered because a local boy led a stranger to it for a handful of corn. I'll explain in a second. Imagine a city cut directly into the face of a cliff. Not built against it, cut into it. Entire temples, tombs, and theaters carved from rose-red sandstone. A city of 60,000 people, carved from rock so completely that when it was abandoned, the desert just sealed it off. For 1,000 years, Petra existed only in Arab folklore. The locals called it the Lost City, but no Western explorer had seen it. In 1812, a Swiss explorer named Johann Ludwig Burckhardt changed that. He'd been traveling the Middle East in disguise, wearing Arab clothing, speaking Arabic, going by the name Sheikh Ibrahim. He'd heard rumors of incredible ruins near a place called Wadi Musa. He wanted to see them, but the Bedouin tribes guarding the area did not let strangers through. So Burckhardt invented a story. He told the local guide he needed to make a sacrifice at the tomb of the prophet Aaron, which sat on a mountain near the ruins. The guide agreed to take him. He squeezed through a narrow gorge, sometimes barely wider than his shoulders, for more than a kilometer. The walls rose 200 feet on either side. Then the gorge turned, and he saw it. The treasury, Al-Khazna, a facade 90 meters tall, carved from a single face of rock. Columns, eagles, urns, and figures, all cut from the living stone. Colors that had barely faded. And that was just the entrance. Behind it lay an entire city. 2,000 tombs carved into the cliff faces. a colonnaded street, a Roman theater with 8,000 seats, temples to gods nobody remembers anymore. Petra was the capital of the Nabatean kingdom, a civilization of Arab merchants who controlled the frankincense and spice trade routes between Arabia, Egypt, and Rome. At their peak, they figured out how to collect rainwater in the desert, an elaborate system of pipes and cisterns that kept 60,000 people alive in one of the driest places on Earth. Then Rome absorbed them. Trade routes shifted. People left. The desert crept in. By the time the Crusaders passed through in the 12th century, Petra was mostly empty. They built a small castle and left. For another 600 years, nothing. Until one Swiss man and his story about a sacrifice brought it back to the world. Number 3. A city that wasn't just lost. It was a civilization that built indoor plumbing 5,000 years ago, and whose language we still cannot read. I'll explain why that's terrifying in a moment. In 1922, a British archaeologist named R.D. Banerjee was digging through a Buddhist monastery in what is now Pakistan. He expected Buddhist relics, maybe a few centuries old. What he found instead was 5,000 years old. Streets, laid out in a grid, right angles, consistent widths, drainage channels running beneath every road, an urban planning system that wouldn't appear again in Europe for another 4,000 years. He had found Mohenjo-daro, one of the largest cities of the ancient world, and almost nobody had heard of it. Here's what's extraordinary about the Indus Valley civilization. Mohenjo-daro had a population of somewhere between 40 and 50,000 people. It covered more than 250 hectares. It had a great bath, a watertight brick pool roughly 12 meters long, used, historians believe, for ritual purification. It had a granary large enough to feed a city. It had multi-story homes with indoor plumbing, brick-lined toilets connected to underground sewers, at a time when most of the world was still living in mud huts. And then around 1900 BC, it was abandoned. Not sacked, not destroyed, not burned, just left. Families apparently walked away, leaving pottery on shelves, tools in workshops. Some researchers suggest a slow migration southward as the Indus River changed course. Others point to climate change or disease or shifting trade routes. Nobody knows for certain. Here's the part that still gets archaeologists arguing today. There is almost no evidence of warfare in the entire Indus Valley civilization. No weapons caches. No fortifications built to keep people out. No mass graves of battle victims. For 700 years, this culture covered an area larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. And they apparently did it without armies. We don't know how. We don't know why they left. We don't even know what they called themselves. Mohenjo-daro means Mound of the Dead in Sindhi, a name given by the people who found it, not the people who built it. The builders are still a mystery. We're halfway through this list, and I need you to stay because number 2 has a detail that genuinely changes how you think about the ancient world. And number 1. A city so sacred it was hidden in plain sight for 3,000 years, right in front of millions of people. Let's keep going. Most Americans have never heard of it. It's 40 minutes from downtown St. Louis. It sits between 2 interstates. You can see it from the highway if you know where to look. And at its peak, around the year 1100 AD, it was larger than London. Cahokia, the largest pre-Columbian city north of Mexico. A city of 20,000 people. Maybe more. Imagine a city built almost entirely of earth. Not stone. Not brick. Mounds. More than 120 earthen mounds, some of them still standing today. The largest Monk's Mound is 30 meters tall. It covers more ground than the Great Pyramid of Giza, and it was built entirely by hand, basket by basket, over generations. At the top stood a wooden building roughly 30 meters long, the home or temple of whoever ruled Cahokia. The city had a central plaza 4 times the size of the National Mall in Washington, D.C. It had a stockade wall 2 kilometers long enclosing the core. It had wooden circles, archaeologists call them Mohenjo, aligned precisely with the solstices, used, historians believe, as solar calendars. Here's the part that gets me about Cahokia. In the early 1100s, the city apparently went through a massive reorganization, all at once. Neighborhoods demolished, thousands of people relocated, new plazas built, new mounds raised. It happened so fast that archaeologists think it was a single decision, from a single authority. Somebody redesigned a city of 20,000 people practically overnight. And then, around 1200 AD, Cahokia began to shrink. By 1350, it was empty. Historians believe a combination of factors drove the population away: deforestation, flooding, agricultural collapse, political instability. By the time European explorers arrived in the 1600s, local tribes knew about the mounds but had no memory of who had built them. Some stories called them the work of ancient giants. They weren't giants. They were Americans. Today, Cahokia is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a place that should be as famous as Machu Picchu. Most Americans drive past it without knowing it exists. Number 1. A city so holy, so deliberately hidden, that the civilization that built it went to extraordinary lengths to keep it off every map. And they almost succeeded. There is a city at the bottom of the sea. Not a metaphor, not mythology. An actual city, submerged under 40 feet of water in the Gulf of Kumbat off the western coast of India. And it may be the oldest city ever found. In 2001, scientists from India's National Institute of Ocean Technology were doing acoustic surveys of the Gulf. They were looking for pollution levels. What the sonar showed them stopped the survey. Geometric structures, right angles, grids. Something that did not belong on the ocean floor. Divers went down. They came back with samples. Pottery, human bones, the remnants of walls. Carbon dating on the wood samples returned a date of around 7300 BC. That's 9,000 years ago. That is 2,000 years before the oldest known city in the Mesopotamian world. If those dates are confirmed, and not all archaeologists agree they are, Dwarka would be the oldest urban settlement ever discovered by human beings. Here's what makes it extraordinary. In Hindu tradition, Dwarka is the sacred city of Lord Krishna, a golden city of palaces and temples that sat at the mouth of a great river, ruled by a god-king, and was eventually submerged beneath the sea. The text that describes it, the Mahabharata, was written roughly 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. It describes the drowning of Dwarka as an event that had already happened in the distant past. For centuries, Dwarka was considered scripture, sacred, not history, and then the sonar found structures in the exact location the text described. Now, the debate matters here. The original carbon dating has been questioned. The structures are difficult to excavate in the murky, current-heavy waters of the Gulf. Some researchers believe the geometric shapes may have natural explanations. The full story is still being written. But here's what isn't debated. Dwarka on the coast of Gujarat has been continuously occupied as a sacred site for at least 3,000 years. Pilgrims have come there for millennia. Above the water, temples have been rebuilt over and over on the same spot. A civilization built a city there. The sea took it. The memory of it survived. Not in archives, not in inscriptions, but in stories told from parent to child for 90 generations. Think about that. 90 generations of people kept the memory of a drowned city alive. Long enough for sonar to find it. They were right. 5 cities, 5 different ways the world forgets and remembers. Troy, a poem that turned out to be a map. Petra, a kingdom carved into rock, sealed by sand for 1,000 years. Mohenjo-daro, a civilization of 50,000 people who built indoor plumbing 5,000 years ago, and whose language we still cannot read. Cahokia, a city larger than medieval London, sitting beneath American soil that millions drive past every day. And Dwarka, a sacred city at the bottom of the sea, remembered by 90 generations before science finally found it. Every one of these places was called a myth before it was called real. That makes you wonder, what's still out there? What's the next Troy? The next Petra? What are we still calling a legend that future generations will find beneath a jungle or a sea? Drop your answer in the comments. What city or civilization do you think is still waiting to be found? I read every single one. If this gave you something, share it.